What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you, but they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast. I am Ken Frownfelter. Hey, what do you do to keep healthy? I guess a better question is, do you do anything to keep healthy, to stay fit? If you're a police officer or a firefighter, one would assume you work out regularly. But do you? For all the other heroes out there, veterans, nurses, doctors, teachers, what do you do to stay fit? So today's guest is Marc Hildebrand, and he is I remember first time I met Marc, he was, I saw him on Facebook. He brought in it was a little thing, said, hey, are you law enforcement or are you a first responder, and do you want to get in shape? Do you want to work out? You want to, something along those lines. And I said, hey, I fit those bills. And actually I'd been working out for a long time, and I still work out. And that's just something that I was, I had things that I was always doing. I was always a karate guy, and I was always a workout guy. And then I was always, I play the drums. So those are the three things that I thought that's what, how I define myself. And so when somebody else brought this up saying, hey, there's, a fitness thing. Okay. Hey, I'm a cop too. I can go ahead and I can jump into this, and I can have, I have either input or I can understand where people are coming from. With that being said, I said, hey, I'm interested. And so then I got a reply back, and I never really gotten a whole bunch of replies back on Facebook from people I didn't know. And so the person said, oh, hey, that's cool. We'll sign you up. We'll get you hooked in. And have you ever heard of, beach body products like P90X and things like that? And I said, oh yeah. I've been doing P90X. Actually, that's one of the things when workouts started getting stale that I started doing was P90X, and then P90X2 and those things like that. And so I said, hey, I'm into it, and I think one of the ones that you pointed out to me was, it was the body beast or something like that.
Yes. Body beast.
Sagi Kalev. And, so I did that, and people hadn't seen me, people I hadn't seen for a while. They're like, holy cow, you put on some muscle or whatever. Oh, I guess that body beast really worked. So with that, I was doing those, and I started doing, the boot camp one,
22-minute hardcore?
22-minute hardcore. And I would do that one afterwards. So I kind of put the two, and I did one set, 3 months of the one and then the 3 months of the other. And then I started doing Body Beast on Monday, 22-minute hardcore on Tuesday, and then Body Beast on Wednesday. So I started doing it like that. And so just putting all those together, and I'd see people chime in and say, hey, this is my workout space and whatever it is. So I do all sorts of stuff. Sometimes I don't want to just work out at home. So we have a workout area at work, and I'll go to the gym. You try to break it up. So what I'm saying is that all these things, I started actually getting that correspondence with Marc. And then when you started talking to me, and then you actually gave me your cell phone number, and I said, holy cow, that's great, because I noticed that it was an area code for the Los Angeles area, because I grew up down there. Because I remember I grew up in Tarzana, Reseda, and
nice.
And so I was like, I know that area code. So that was my introduction to Marc Hildebrand. And when I started the podcast, I said, that's somebody I'd love to get on here. He gets it. He gets the law enforcement, and he gets the physical aspect of it. So, Marc, welcome to the What's a Hero podcast.
I appreciate it, sir. Yeah, I've been listening to some of your podcasts. You're a great host. You ask a lot of great questions. And then we connected a long time ago, man. I don't even remember those conversations, but I hope I've improved since then. But even then, I mean, it is still funny to hear how I connect with people, even like 4, 5, 6 years ago, just by, reaching out, like you said, it's kind of weird to get a message just from some random person, but how about this? How about when somebody else responds back to that message and I'm like, oh, wow, Ken. All right, cool. What's up, brother?
Yeah.
It's just, it's the opportunity that we have right now. Just to connect, because we would have never connected if we hadn't, didn't have this kind of opportunity on social media. Right.
Exactly. And I think about that, and somebody said, hey, how about, because I think somebody else that I work with follows you, and they said, well, what about Marc Hildebrand? And I said, oh, that's a great idea, because I see your stuff on Instagram all the time. And, and I noticed that you have a lot more followers, you do more stuff. And then I saw that you did a podcast. I'm like, oh, that's it. Yeah, he gets it. So I wanted to get you on here. And, I could say, hey, early on in my podcast, I had this guy, and he was fantastic. Oh yeah, I've heard of him. I know him. And yeah, so no, that's awesome. So what I like to do is with my guests, get in here and figure out why it is you do what you do. Being a police officer, you've been a police officer for how long?
18 years.
18 years. 4 years longer than me. And so I like to figure out why people get to that point, and then I know that you also have some hiccups. You have some speed bumps that you came up along the way. And so that would be awesome to try to get into that. So let's start with it. Who was little Marky?
That's a great question. Little Marky was all about police stuff. So my dad was LAPD as well. And growing up, I was kind of like that, that nerd that wanted to know as much information as I possibly could. I remember still driving around with my dad and just like asking him, hey, Dad, quiz me on some of your police stuff. Quiz me on some of the police stuff. And he would be like, okay, well, somebody's on this side of the beach and they do this and they commit this infraction. What penal code would that be? And I'd be like, oh, that's a great question. How about this? And I was like 7 or 8. And it was just this constant, I just loved hearing the stories that he would tell me. He worked the Venice Beach detail back then. And he would always tell me about how these, how it was just so fun and how all these crazy things were happening. And so that was just something that I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be, just have a job where it was like that. It was a career that I actually loved and enjoyed and could have as much fun as he did. So I guess it was ever since I was young.
Was it watching TV, or just because he did it and you saw him come home in uniform, or you go to functions or whatever, and he'd be there with the other guys that were cops? Or was it something that just, and did you, I guess let me back up myself because I'm getting ahead of my own questions, but was it one of those things where you started, you saw the other side of it, what it causes? Or was it one of those things that you said, oh, I like learning the penal codes, and I like learning, the beats, and I like, was it the people, or was it the things of?
That's a great question, man. And I'm just trying to think back to it right now, because when I was that young, I had a desire to help people, but I think at that specific, just from being that young, it was just something so cool. And I remember seeing my dad in uniform. I remember him just telling me about some of the stories, some of the buddies that he would have come over on occasion, or we would go out and meet them and meet their families and stuff like that. It just seemed really cool. And I think that's initially was my push. It wasn't really so much of making a huge impact, even though it has transitioned to that. But at the time, it was just this is a really cool thing to do. And yeah, there's a lot of awesome, Hawaii 5-0 and Magnum PI and all those, right? And even Knight Rider and stuff like that. You're like, oh man, they're the heroes. And so back then, that was just a big deal. And so, I would watch those shows. My dad would watch some of those shows. But really, I just thought it was something that was really cool.
That's cool. And so I'm assuming you played outside, and you didn't watch other than those shows. I mean, you grew up in the 80s like I did, and you watched cartoons and did whatever, but you spent a large portion of your time playing outside and riding your bike and going and doing stuff, not so much just being a couch potato and wanting to just have people feed you and put you to bed all the time.
Yeah, it's it just kind of brings back actually a lot of memories, just because so the way that my dad was a police officer, he was he gave a lot of his life to the career. He was working overtime all the time. He was working all the different units. He was spending a lot of time away from home. And whenever he was home, I wanted to be that, ask him those questions and things like that, but he wasn't home a lot. Yeah. And so ultimately him and my mom got divorced, and I ended up going to live with my dad, which back then was like unheard of. Right. Like mom's always won custody, but like I got to live with him. And so that means he worked more overtime and he had more security jobs. So most of the time I was at home taking care of my younger brother. He was 3 years younger than me. And I would be making food for him. And then we'd go outside and we'd play. And I'd sort of have to be like makeshift dad to get him inside to eat and then to go back outside. But yeah, we were never inside. I don't even remember until like the street lights came on and you would come home. Like it was always like outside. But I always had a like added responsibility of having to watch after my brother, because my dad was like always trying to make ends meet, is what he would say. And he was not spending a lot of time at home.
Yeah. So that I guess that makes it difficult sometimes too. So then obviously you're growing up, you're doing all this stuff, you have this responsibility of being kind of a makeshift adult, and you're a kid, however, but you had to learn how to be an adult quick. Yeah. And you go through school. And was that when you were going through high school and whatever, was it one of those things, I'm going to be a cop when I turn 21 and that's what I'm going to go do? Or was it, I got to go to college because obviously I'm going to graduate at 18 and I've got another 3 years until I go and do this? And, or, what was the mindset, your planning process through school?
So my dad basically told me like, hey, if you want to have a head start, definitely get some college, because right now at that time, when I was making my way through high school, he was like, it's actually very important for you to get college. It's hard to get on the department, because it was hard at that point to get on. And so I had this idea of, well, first off, I started working when I was 14, but I worked through, and when I became about 18, that's when I became a security officer, because my dad gave me a lot of direction in terms of, hey, these are the things you want to do to prepare yourself so that you're not only ready for the job and you've gone through some life experience, but at the same time, you have like that credibility of having that the college degree, as well as you've worked in that field. And so I basically just followed his advice. And when I was 22 is when I applied to get on the job. It took me about a year and a half to get on. And then that's kind of like when it happened. So I just really took his advice with that. And he said, either you got to go to college or you're going to go to the military. And I was like, I think I'll go to college. So that's kind of the direction that I took. And sometimes I kick myself because maybe the military would have helped. Obviously it would have been totally different. I would have probably totally changed. But yeah, I go back to that thought every once in a while, like maybe I should have.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think the same thing. Actually, my last podcast I interviewed a Vietnam veteran, and he was talking about that same thing. And his was, I go to college or I can go in the military. I guess I'm going to the military. And his just the opposite. However, it worked out for him. Everybody has their own role to play, and everybody has their own path to follow, which is awesome. And you get in, and so you get into being a police officer, and you're doing it down in Los Angeles at LAPD. That's the big time. There's the big time. There's LAPD, there's NYPD, and there's all these other police departments. You got the two big ones. And so you get in there when it was more difficult to get into that world, correct?
It was at that time.
And so
a lot of people applying.
Yeah. And I'm assuming it was gymnasiums filled with people testing and stuff like that, right?
There was no seating in the room that I went into to do the test. It was like there was people who were standing up and doing the test against the walls. I think there was maybe like 120 people who were there actually all doing it. It was just completely packed, which is totally different than nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. It's totally, yeah, I agree with you. So you get in there and you start learning the ropes. You start learning this whole thing. Were you still thinking, because when we go in, and I remember the canned answer because I've been on a couple of oral boards and stuff like that. And you sit there, and the question is, why do you want to do this? Well, I want to help people. And, there's a point where you don't want to help people anymore because people become people. And as much as you might love somebody, there's going to be a point where you don't like that person because they do things that either annoy you or whatever. Well, there's evil people in the world that we know there are. What happens to that person who wants to help people, who doesn't want to help people anymore, who says, I don't want to do that. I don't, because that person's, what is it inside you that says, well, I got to keep going?
That's a great question. I think just in the process of and this is just in life in general, you kind of grow through a lot of things. Like you maybe have this intention of like when you get started, like, hey, this is like the reason why I'm doing this. And then you get like pushed up against this wall and that's like the point, the fork in the road, right? Where you get to make a decision like, okay, am I going to sit down and am I going to like make a pivot and continue down this path? Or am I going to go on an entirely different path? And I mean, and I can give you an example. Like literally, I found myself doing exactly what my dad was doing. Like I signed up for every single unit I possibly could. I was giving all my time to the career. I was coming in early for overtime, for like search warrants and TAC plans that were being put together. I was a court qualified gang expert. People were calling me all hours of the night, and I thought I was doing it right because I'm like, oh, this is just the way it's supposed to be because this is how my dad did it. Right. And it was that point where I was like, wait, like there's people who are on the department who are doing this, but they're also getting their health under control. They're also spending time with their family and connecting deeper with them, and they're still rocking their career. So obviously I might be doing something wrong. So which path did I take and which one can I go back and maybe go on the other fork? And so that was a big aha moment for me too. But yeah, when you think about that, like you come on, you're so naive. Like you think that like things are going to work out a certain way. They never work out the way that you think they are. Right. There's always going to be pivots. There's always going to be speed bumps, adjustments. You're going to have to jump over the wall, sometimes break through the wall. Like all of that's always going to happen. That's actually the normal is when that happens, right? Because it's never going to end up the way that you think it is. And it's those pivots that actually make, I think, for the greatest opportunities, because like even right now, some people always reach out to me and say, Mark, like, I don't know if I should be a police officer or not. I'm really thinking about doing it still, but with everything going on, I don't know if I should do this. And what I have to say is like right now, like they have the greatest opportunity right now ever, because right now, like here's kind of the way I think it. If somebody wants to be a police officer in these times, like they're wanting to do it for all the right reasons, right? They're not wanting to do it because they want to make an extra few dollars. They want to make an impact. They want to like actually show people what being a police officer is all about, right? And so it's not just like oh, hey, you know what? I'm doing this for some spare change to get paid a little bit more. They're like, no, like this is, so it's like that opportunity always comes in the face of just like a great question like this, like, which path are you going to take? Are you going to make this be the thing that, is your demise? And so now you hate your job. And so you go to work and you're just negative and you're bringing everybody else down, or you're going to take it the other direction and say, okay, what opportunities does this create? Because now I've learned this because I'm not naive anymore.
Right. Right. Because, when you go into something and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to do this, you're not thinking about all the obstacles. When you get in there and the obstacles are there, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, when I thought about this, I was sitting on my couch, I was drinking a shake or whatever. I was reading David Goggins' book, You Can't Hurt Me. And he mentions that same thing. When you're doing it, when you're watching it on TV, you're like, oh, hey, that's motivating. I want to get in and I want to do that. And then all of a sudden you go to do it and you're like, oh, this is more difficult than I thought. Well, that's the idea is I'm going to go into this. I'm going to do it. There's the joke of, hey, why'd you become a police officer? Oh, because I want to drive fast and carry a gun. Well, okay, that's cool. But what about when you start having expectations thrown on you? You have stressors being put back on you. Like you said, you were an expert witness, right? And so that means when you get into court, people are expecting that you're going to tell the right thing. If you say something, they're going to be able to see through the BS if it's there, right? So that's just the idea. You have to be at the top of your game of who you are. And, if you don't know it, you don't know it. And that's okay. You can not know things. You're allowed to not know things. However, don't say you do and then get in there and be like, oh, I can do whatever.
Exactly.
And you cannot. So, that's just the bottom line. And that's when you get into something, the basics of it. So, when you start going through all this different stuff, as you get into being a police officer and doing it for a long period of time, I'm guessing life starts taking its toll on you, and you start, as we all start getting older and start going through different things. I'm sure you get married, you have kids, you have families, you have all these different responsibilities you have coming at you, and then maybe your opportunity to stay healthy or eat right, or especially with working in the middle of the night or getting called in the middle of the night, or doing all these different things, and then donuts being brought into the office, and everybody knows about cops and donuts and the whole thing. And there's always that sort of thing. So what happened? Did anything happen to you in that vein, or was it just easy sailing the whole way?
No, absolutely not. So even before I got out of the department, I always struggled with my weight. After high school, I kind of let it go downhill with all of the schooling and different jobs and stuff that I had. I ended up getting to be 267 pounds. And in order to get into the academy, I basically had to go through sort of like a crash diet where like I wasn't eating. I was going to the gym for like 2 hours a day. Then I was going out and running. I was basically hating myself to health, right? And so I got down to about 200, and I was doing this up and down, up and down. And then of course I got on the job, I get off probation, and the same things kept happening, up and down and up and down. And anytime that I would get myself healthy, and I don't want to even say healthy because I wasn't healthy. I was just doing things to really hurt me, but I was losing some weight. And that really like weighed on me, because like when you're actually fueling your body with the right foods and doing workouts that aren't like actually hurting you and beating you up, like it actually gives more into these other areas of your life, especially your mental and emotional health.
Right.
And it was at that time that my first son was born, Andrew, or my son was born. My first kid was born. And this was 11 years ago. And he was 1 pound 9 ounces, and he had to spend 73 days in the NICU.
Wow.
So when my wife had him, she had something called the HELP syndrome, where she basically, they had to get the baby out. And we basically had to leave the hospital like 3 or 4 days later and leave him there. And we could only come and visit him like once a day between these hours.
Oh, that's got to be the most difficult.
And that was terrible, because I wasn't in that position physically to be ready for that, but I was not mentally or emotionally. And I had a massive breakdown to the point where I had to go see a police psychologist. I had to like take some time off of work. I ended up developing shingles. Like it was like this downward spiral, right? And I really couldn't show up for anybody. And it was then that I had the realization that like, okay, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to get these areas of my life under control. I just don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to find a way, because obviously there's answers out there. It's just, I don't know it. And I've got to be willing to push my ego down and find somebody who can maybe help me. And so that's kind of when I started that mission of, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out my health. Initially it was my health. I wanted to focus on my family, but I knew that I had to give to myself first. So first I started to focus on my health.
Right. That I've talked about it before on the podcast, but that idea of taking care of yourself before you take care of other people. And it boils down to just like what say on an airplane, fix your mask before you fix their mask. There's that idea that if you take care of yourself before you take care of others. And you mentioned just a little bit ago that I noticed that I wasn't being able to take care of other people, and I had to take care of myself before I could even take care of my family. And it's that idea that, and they say it in the airlines when you get on a plane, make sure your mask is fixed before you start fixing somebody else's mask. Mm-hmm. Because you have to take care of yourself. If you're not there to take care of them, you're not going to be there to take care of them. And so that it boils down to that same idea. So you start looking at that whole thing of I've got to look at something, and I know something's out there, but what is it? And so what did you do?
Everything. I literally started trying everything. I tried like Billy Blank's Thai bow. I tried that like the Bowflex machines at home. I tried the Chuck Norris. What is that stupid little thing that he has with Christy Brinkley? Sliding. I forget the name of that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's sliding on it and he's pulling.
Yeah. So like I was trying everything, man. I was like, I don't know. I'm just gonna try until I find something that works. And it was finally one of my coworkers, he was a narco at the time. He's like, you know what? I'm doing this thing called P90X. Maybe you should give it a try. And I'm like, hey, I've heard P90X, but I'm like way overweight. Like he's like, dude, just modify, just do the best you can. And he was a coach at the time. And I'm like, hey, I see that you're this coach thing. Like, what's up with that? He's like, oh yeah, you can join my team and we'll kind of keep each other accountable. And so I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And that was that piece that was missing for me. It was in really how it broke down is they broke it down in simplicity when it comes to like direction with fitness, some direction with nutrition along with supplements, and then holding yourself accountable with other people who kind of understand what you do for a living, understand the background, right, but yet they're not giving in and they're pushing it gets you to push too. And so those three things just like really helped me fall into alignment, and I lost weight. Teresa, my wife, got on board. She started doing it. She started to feel well. And I just had another podcast interview right before this. And one of the things that he said is like just how much more other areas of your life actually explode when you take care of yourself. Like your relationships are better. Your connection with your wife or your kids is better. Your experience at work, you're offered promotions. Like people come out of the woodwork and they go like, hey, I want to follow you. And it's because of, I guess, that vibrancy that we bring when we have that level of energy and we're actually fueling our bodies like that. And so it's like, I know we talk about those oxygen masks, right? And it can kind of feel like we're being selfish when we do take care of ourselves. But actually that's like the most selfless thing that you can do, because your health is your foundation, right? You think about your foundation. And if your foundation is crumbling, you're not getting enough sleep, right? Like we've all been there where we have like, we're getting 3 hours of sleep every day. We're going to court. We're going back to on duty. We're going to overtime. And like, we are not on our game. Like our mind isn't there. And then we're expected to hold a gun and get in use of forces and do all these kind of things. Right. And it's just not possible with how our foundation is like cracking. And so just actually sitting down and realizing like, hey, I can be a better father if I take care of my health. Right. That was the push that I needed. And I was like, you know what? Hell yeah. Because my kid did not say, hey, can I have Marc Hildebrand as my dad? And yeah, I would really like if he could let me down because he wanted to, give everything to his career. No, he was like born into it. And I'm like, dude, like he has no say in this. I have the say. So I've got to really take that under control. And so flipping that switch was the mindset cue for me. And yes, I found the workouts and stuff that worked, but my mindset was the most important of all. And that was like, no matter what, I'm going to find a way. There's a way out there. I just haven't found it yet.
Right.
And with that mindset, that's all you need. You're going to find the tactics, but if you don't have that mindset, it doesn't matter, because you could even find that thing. If you're not going to do it for long enough, you'll never know if it works. Right.
Right. I was on SWAT for a number of years, and that was one of the things we would, right before we'd go in and do something, we'd go on a mission or whatever. Mm-hmm. That was always we'd line up, check our gear. And then with that, the question would be asked, you good? Well, yeah, I'm good. Everything good at home? Yeah, everything's good at home. They want to make sure you're good at home. You're not thinking about that. They want to make sure, hey, is everything okay? Here, do you have any injuries? Nope. I don't think about my ankle, or I don't have to think about my knee, or whatever the case, my back, whatever. I don't have to think about those things. Okay. So that's one more thing you don't have to worry about. Okay. So everything good? If you're sitting there struggling because you got, a mortgage piling up, or bills are piling up, or you're not being responsible, all these different things, that stuff's going to take away from being able to help out your partners and your fellow officers, all this different stuff. The other side of it is if you are disciplined enough to work out, to make sure you're okay and you're going to be safe and sound, and the things you're doing are solid, and they see that you have that discipline, like you said, those promotions are coming your way. The ability to be, to be able to speak into somebody else's life and them actually take you as being credible. Right. Because you have something to offer them, because they see, oh, he's obviously doing it. How often do we see somebody who's, they says, hey, you do this, and then you look at them and, somebody says, don't, you shouldn't be smoking, as they're just puffing on a, a cigar or whatever. You shouldn't be, you should really, like, it's like those guys who are doctors, you see them on TV shows or whatever, and they're saying, oh, you should really watch your caloric intake, and your triglycerides and blah, blah, blah. And they are just overweight and they're sloppy, and stuff like that. You don't take them as credible. So you're right. The more you're able to take care of yourself, it is selfless, because people see that, and you're just opening that door and helping and making that available, making yourself available for other people to be able to latch on. And then you just teach them to fish instead of giving the fish.
Exactly.
So that's awesome that you start seeing that happen. And so you said your wife started seeing that too, because she's doing it. And so your kids start seeing that. I'm assuming your kids are very active at this point now. Back then they started seeing the building blocks of these things happening, and they probably only known you as somebody who's always just done that, right? At this point.
Yes. They, for them, like back then when I was actually going through that, my son was just born and my daughter wasn't even here yet. So Yeah, to them, it's just normal. Mom and dad every morning go into the garage. They do some exercise. Every day I will go out for a walk. I just completed the 75 hard. And as a part of that, you have to do 2 workouts. My second workout was always a 45-minute walk. And basically what I do is every day I have a different family member that goes with me. So either my son, my daughter, or my wife. And so that's just a normal part of life, is like, okay, it's time for dad's walk. Who's going to go with him? Hey, I want to go with him. And right now they still fight over me. I'm sure that pretty soon that'll change, because mine are 12 and 10. But yeah, it's just a normal part of life, like eating healthy, doing all those exercises. That's just normal. And I love to think about what that's going to like breathe into their life, right? Into the future.
Right. Since you brought up that 75 hard, I know there was a list of things that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of those is work out twice a day, at least 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is drinking an X amount of water, at least
a gallon
of water a day. What are the others?
3 is you have to follow a nutrition plan that does not have any cheat meals or cheat anything, and it does not have alcohol. So you can't have alcohol, any cheat meals, and you have to follow a nutrition guide or plan, whatever plan you decide. You have to follow it 100%. You have to read 10 pages of a personal development book. It can't be audio. It has to be something that you read. It's got to be personal development based. And you got to take a progress picture every day for 75 days. So all 5 of those things you do for 75 days, and then you complete the original part of 75 hard.
And you said you just finished it, or you're in the middle of it?
No, so I finished 75 hard. I took about a month break, and now I'm on to phase 1. So there's different phases after that, which are shorter in length, 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. The program itself is supposed to be a year long, but you have intermittent where you have months of not doing it. And it kind of the basis, I don't know. Do you understand the basis behind the program?
No.
So the person who created it, Andy Frisella, he has a huge and awesome podcast. He's the owner of First Form. But basically what he did is he put together these 5 things to basically allow you to develop what's called mental toughness. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily about losing weight, even though that will happen. It's not about gaining muscle, even though that will happen. It's not about growing internally by reading books, even though that will happen. It's about developing mental toughness. And what that is like, you take these 5 things and you basically say, this is what I'm going to do for 75 days. And then you follow through with it, and you put yourself in a situation where it's uncomfortable, where it's easier to skip out on it, but you stay true to it. It gives you this clarity of like, if I can do this stuff, all that other stuff is not a problem at all. I mean, when you think about that, you got to do 2 workouts a day. They have to be 45 minutes. There has to be at least 3 hours separating them. And you have to do one of those workouts outside. It doesn't matter if it's snowing. It doesn't matter if it's raining. One of those workouts has to be outside. Just a matter of fact, you know? And so
in LA to say,
I'm good. Like the worst that I got, it was like 34 degrees and it was raining. That was the worst that I got. And I have people who are like in Alaska and it says minus 30. I'm like, minus 30. I'm like, why are you living out there? But yeah, they're out there, they're walking, they're doing their workouts and they're doing. So yes, it builds this resiliency of like, hey, I'm going to do a workout today. All this other stuff, the BS outside, the circumstances, that doesn't matter. I'm going to do a workout today. I'll find a way. And it just builds this into it like literally then transcends other areas of your life because it just makes everything seem so much easier.
Right. And that's cool. I mean, because you don't even think about, you think, okay, I got my workout in or whatever. And you think later on, I got to go do this again. I got to go do another workout again later on today. Or I've got to get that gallon of water in. Cause I know people who are doing like gallon of water challenge or whatever. And I've walked into dispatch before and all the girls have a gallon of water next to the console. And I'm like, holy cow. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get through this thing today. and I get it, you know, dragging that thing around with you everywhere you go and all that different stuff. And it's difficult. However, the bottom line is what the ultimate thing that's going to be awesome about it is you're going to be lubricated. Your joints are fed and your muscles are going to be more supple. And I mean, all these different things that are just going to be beneficial to you. It's going to actually help your thought process and how you think and all those different things. So that's just the water alone. You start getting into the other thing of no cheating. You know, you don't get to sneak a donut or you sneak an Oreo or you don't get.
Nope.
Yeah. Just because it's the beginning of your days off doesn't mean you're having a drink.
Nope.
that sort of thing, so it's awesome. That's super cool. And I saw it, but I didn't understand what it was. I get the idea and the premise. That's awesome, but I didn't realize what it was. So that's fantastic to know. So, so going back, let's go back. So you're working through this whole thing where you're trying to get healthy, and you're working the job, you're working nights, you're working overtime, you're going to court, you're having to do all these different things. And I say go to court. You're not necessarily always going to court while you're working. Sometimes you got to go to court when you're not at work and on your days off and things like that. So you're going in, you're doing all that same stuff, and you're trying to work out now to try to get healthy. Mm-hmm. Something that's kind of been with you for a long time has flared up about that point. Am I right in my time frame, or am I a little bit off?
Are you talking about the whole Crohn's thing?
Whole Crohn's thing. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point. So so this was about maybe 4 years ago that this started to happen. So so I actually had lost all the weight. I had gotten into the best shape of my life. I got down, ended up losing 100 pounds total from where I was back when I was younger. And I was feeling amazing. And I was taking more control of my hours. I literally, like right now, I am in investigations where I have Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays off, in a position where I wouldn't want to be there, because I always want to be out on the street, but I'm doing it because, number one, I get to sleep like a regular human being, but number two, I get to see my kids, right? And so right now, that's like the most important thing to me. But about 4 years ago, I started to not feel so well. And ultimately what happened is I ended up losing 30 pounds in 30 days. And the doctors were like nervous. And I'm like, dude, I got this pain. It's like in my stomach. I don't know what's going on. And they're like, we don't understand. You're in the healthiest you've ever been. Your blood levels are all perfect. Needless to say, after about 9 months of like experimenting on me and everything, they finally found out I have an autoimmune now. It's called Crohn's disease. Uh-huh. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with autoimmunes or Crohn's disease, but basically an autoimmune is your immune system kind of goes whack and your body starts attacking a specific area of your body. Some people have like Hashimoto's, which attacks their thyroid. Well, Crohn's disease attacks your digestive system. Uh-huh. And so basically the food that I was eating was not able to be digested. And my body was actually creating cuts inside of my digestive tract to not only make food painful, but to make it impossible to digest. And so I was like losing weight. I was very, unhealthy. Yeah. And what was funny is that, and it wasn't funny, but at the time it was tough, because I was like, you know what? Like I spent all this time eating like crap and treating my body terribly, and my body was able to overcome it. And then I just got healthy. And then this happens to me. Like I just literally changed it. I lost 100 pounds. I'm like in the incredible shape. I'm getting sleeping now. And what I didn't realize is that all of the years of the stress, all of the years of the environment that I put myself in, all of the years of working those crazy shifts and not getting enough sleep affected my body to the point where I had actually done damage. And it basically, everything aligned and boom, it activated. And now I have Crohn's disease, which is weird because it's something that is supposedly hereditary, but nobody in my family has ever suffered from this. Weird. The funny thing is though, now that I go to, whenever I go to my doctor, his office is flooded with first responders, people who have these kind of careers, people who like give to, everybody and take away from themselves, don't sleep enough, don't eat the proper food. Who knows how much spit I ate, right? By going out to eat at the different restaurants and stuff of people who maybe don't like police, right? So we have no idea what it was, but just the culmination of that led up to developing an autoimmune. And so coming to that realization initially, that was a very dark place for me, because I was like, okay, I gave myself up for this career. And literally the doctor's telling me the career is what caused this on you. And like, I kind of was in a dark place where I was like, I brought this on myself. But not only that, but like this career that now people are telling me like, you're a police officer, and they're degrading me because of the career that I'm doing. And they're basically making me feel less than. Not only do I have that, but I also have the fact that I have to deal with an autoimmune disease for the rest of my life. Right. And so I started to become negative again. I started to become like that dude, why is this happening to me? And thankfully, because of the people that I surrounded myself with, because of the personal development I had done, in the books that I plugged into, the mentors that I reached out to, the coaching that I got, the police psychologists that I went to go see many, many times, it was able to build me back up. And to make this, like how we said in the beginning, to make this like an actual great opportunity. Because like, if I can perform at the level that I'm at now and have autoimmune disease where I have to take a Humira injection in my leg once every other week to basically suppress my immune system, and I can still show up, like, what does that say for everybody else? And I can tell you, like, a lot of people reach out to me and go, dude, I didn't even know that you had an autoimmune disease. How are you able to like still do all of these things? And it's because it's always possible. You just got to find like, you just got to have that mindset of like, hey, it's out there. I just got to find a way of finding it. And like we say all the time, like, and push your ego down, because if you already knew what to do, you would have already done it. Right. And so it's a matter of looking outside yourself and pushing your ego down and getting out there and going, okay, what do I have to learn? And then just, making it an opportunity rather than making it your like demise, which is what I see a lot of people do who have autoimmunes. It's like, now it's their crutch. And I'm like, no, you can actually use that as an opportunity to inspire people, but you get to decide, right? It's not me to decide for you.
Right. There's that idea that victim mentality that we shouldn't have. We don't have, and I mentioned this on a couple podcasts ago with Susie, and I was bringing that idea up that, I went through a dark time, and it was just, in my mind, it was just victim, poor me, if I had this option or if this opportunity had been given to me or whatever the case may be, I would have been able to blah, 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 blah. I had to actually go back and tell myself, you can't do that. I don't have, I've had some knee surgeries. And so I'm like, oh, well, I can't do the things I used to. Well, yeah, you're not 19. It's not going to happen. So yeah, you're not going to be able to, do those things that you used to do when like you went through boot camp or whatever, when you were in the military, all these different things that, I said, well, if I could, I would, coulda, woulda, shoulda. All right. The idea is you can't have that mentality where you say, well, how come this is happening to me? And, I don't see that person having, you don't know that person's story. Maybe they did have something bad. They're not letting victimhood take hold of them. So the same thing with me is you can't hold that victimhood. And like you just said, having your ego get out of the way and dropping that and saying, I can't have this in my way, because your ego is what's keeping that thing there. That's the thing that's sitting there saying, remember that? Remember when you could do that? You can't do that now. I know I'm such a terrible loser because I can't do that. Yeah, you are. And that's your ego talking. Right. Shut your ego up. My karate teacher, he tells me, he told us, he goes, ego has to get out of there. You can't, there's no room for that ego, because who's your main opponent? Whenever you go against anybody, you're your own main opponent. That's who it is. So you have to fight that person first. You can fight that person. There's not going to be anything in the way when you actually have to go defend yourself physically or mentally, or defend yourself in a situation when there's people or things coming against you. And that's such as your own ego, such as your victimhood or whatever. Yeah, we all had horrible stories that we can share. We can say, hey, this happened to me, or this didn't happen to me, or whatever the case is. It doesn't matter. You have to sit there and say, you're right, it did happen to me. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to climb this speed bump, and I'm going to get through this, because that's all it is a speed bump. I have to go over it. Or like you said before, maybe I got to go through it. I've got to go through this wall. So, that's right on when you say, get your ego out of the way, get your victimhood mentality out of the way, because when those things are in the way, you're not going to be able to be an impact on anybody. It's just like before, you take care of yourself first, you'll be able to take care of everybody else. So, that's perfect. So you get autoimmune, or you get your Crohn's disease under your, under control, to where you have control of it. It doesn't have control of you. That's something I tell my karate students also, is I say, you control it, or it's going to control you. And I'm talking about, when they're trying to hold, a stance, or they're trying to hold their, get their kicks under control or whatever. And they're all looking like a helicopter when they're trying to kick and stuff like that. The idea is, I said, you got to control it, or it's going to control you. Are you kicking, or are you flailing your arms? Okay, so get your arms in. Oh, I see what I'm doing. That idea, and that's the same thing with anything else. You control it before it controls you. And so you get into being able to take care of that. You start getting all these different things, and then you start building up this whole idea of, you said you became a coach for Beachbody. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a good number of people who interact with you on social media
Mm-hmm.
that, and are able to kind of come forward with their stories and tell you, hey, I did this, or I'm not doing this. And do you get feedback? And I guess, because there's pictures of your wife as well, the two of you are, here's our heavy side and here's our lighter side,
Mm-hmm.
and our fit side, our ability to do things side. And do you get people that are coming in and saying, hey, man, thank you so much, and what you did motivated me or inspired me, or anything like that?
I do. And I'm very grateful and thankful for that people do stop and take a second to reach out to me. The one thing that I do have to say about that is like, I like to inspire and to motivate people. But more than that, I like when they take action. I like when they act on it, because, I can make somebody like feel good in that moment. And that I like that. I mean, I definitely like when they reach out, but when they reach out and they say, you know what, you inspired me and this is what I did, because those are like the most impactful moments. So like you said, I became a Beachbody coach about 9 years ago. About 2 years ago, I started to run my own mastermind. I actually created an additional resource, sort of like as my own business, to help out law enforcement officers, not only who wanted to get into, the best mental, physical, and emotional health that they could, but also connect better with their families and set better boundaries at work, so that they could lead from the front at work. And through developing that, I found I even have more of a passion of that than just the fitness, because I post a lot about like before and after pictures, because that's what people think they really want. But I know what they ultimately want, because when they start to transform internally, like the external is a reflection of what's going on internally, right? And so always the inside starts to change first, and the outside is sort of like that second layer of like after the inside changes. Well, when you start getting your health and fitness under control, you start like worrying or like wondering about like what other areas you can excel in. And so right now, what I get most excited about, and I'll give you an example. So one of my mastermind members who is the kind of person who works overtime all the time. Like they're constantly working overtime, and they're doing better when it comes to managing their health and their fitness and their family. It's got a 2-year-old. Okay. And so the other, about a week ago, no, actually a couple weeks ago, he reached out to me and he said, hey, I just want to let you know, like that call that you did, because I do like weekly calls where I talked about different strategies and stuff to be able to connect better with your family and keep your health and fitness and motivation up.
Right.
He's like, you know what, after listening to that call, I decided that I was not going to take overtime on Monday. And when I got into work the night before, they're like, hey, you know what, we have an overtime shift Monday. We'll see you then. He was like, no, I'm not going to work Monday. And they were like, what? You're not going to work Monday? Like, dude, you always work Monday. He's like, no, I've got a date with my 2-year-old daughter. And so I'm going to go see her. And what he said is like, when he came home on Monday, the eyes on his daughter completely lit up, did not expect him to be home. And they spent a couple hours just like playing around and doing the, Barbie unicorn princesses stuff. And he's like, I would have given that up for like $50 extra in my paycheck. And that is something that my daughter will never forget, because we had this, couple hours where we were just chilling on the ground and he's like, I just want to say like that made a huge impact on her and me. And it's going to get me to take better control of my overtime, because before I was thinking, oh, how can I make more money? And now it's like, man, what kind of impact can I make in my daughter's life if I was to do that more often? Right. And that's what I'm like, hell yes, that fuels me. It gives me this desire to continue doing what I'm doing. Because here's the thing, Ken, like you're the right person at the right time that I reached out to. Uh-huh. Most of the people aren't like that. Let me tell you, either they're not supporters or they're negative. They're even police officers who are like negative naysayers, politics. Oh, what is this guy out here trying to teach me? Oh, how is he going to coach me? I'm like, I know how to do this and this and this. And so I don't get the kind of response that I get from you, but it makes it worth it to get through that response, to find people like you because of getting those kind of messages. And so having those every once in a while kind of gives me that fuel to continue to do what I do, which is not pretty. I still go through bumps and struggles and speed bumps. Like it's never perfect. Even with autoimmune, it's never perfect. And I always get kicked back and reminded every once in a while, like, hey, this ain't under your control. You might think it is, but right now it's not.
Right.
And I just constantly get reminded of that. So, I mean, just like everybody else, I go through those struggles too, but there's opportunities in all of it. When I get those messages, it reminds me of like what I'm actually fighting for. And it gives me, it gets me back in the ring for another round.
Right. I've said this before as well. It's that little pebble that we drop in the pond and those ripples.
Yeah.
Where are those ripples going? And what is it? We don't think that little minor thing that we do is going to be a big thing. But when it hits that water and then the ripples, what are those going to turn? Are they going to turn into a wave that's going to push you to shore because you've been lost at sea for a long time? Whatever the case may be. Now, yeah, that's going to be a lot that's going to do, and you have to have a big imagination to be able to see that to be the case. However, that little thing that you do, you never know what it's going to do. How many times has somebody planted a seed and it's become this giant tree or been this nourishing vegetable or fruit or whatever the case is? And that's what it is, So the idea that those little tiny things that you do make a big difference. And then another thing I was thinking about is we can't consider motivation and inspiration as being the ultimate. Yeah, we can motivate somebody all day and we can inspire somebody all day. It's ultimately got to be in that person's wheelhouse and in their will to say, I'm going to keep this going, because motivation and inspiration wane. Those things go away, if it's not constantly just plugged into your brain. That's why, somebody who's working out, they got to have that music that just blaring in their headphones or whatever to keep them working out. And if it stops, they lose their motivation to work out. You can't be that way. You got to go work out, even though there's no music there or whatever the case is. Where's your motivation? Is it internal, like you said? Is that thing that is it all for show? Are you just trying to look good, by lose weight and look good? Or are you working on the inside as you're working on the outside? Dang it, I think I lost it again. Oh, nope, we're still on. Good. I was thinking I lost my feed. You look like
you almost did.
So, but that's my idea, is that it looks, where's your motivation? Is it internal? Do you have it? Is it something that you're able to hold on to? And so and I was mentioning this before, when you get hired, or when you ask that question, why do you want to be a police officer? Why do you want to be, do this? And you say, well, I want to help people. You need something more than that. It's got to be something more tangible that's inside you. Like that seed was planted with your dad years and years and years ago. Had he not done that, had he been just a plumber, you may have said, hey, maybe I want to be a plumber because that looks cool. I don't know. Who knows? The idea is, where did it come from? And then if you can say something that's a little bit deeper, a little bit further, then you can pull that out and you can continue to be able to look back and say, well, I'm doing it because of that. That's why I'm doing whatever I'm doing, whether it's working out, whether it's working a job that's difficult like we work, or it's a firefighter that's working hard. Where's his motivation coming from? Where's his internal thing coming from? And all these different people, where is it that they do the good things that they do, where it is? And that's the idea of the podcast, is what makes the hero. What is a hero? A hero is this guy, or girl that just comes in and does it because they're externally motivated by somebody. No, they're motivated by something that's come from the inside, and whether that you have to, and you might have to work out that thing has to work out, or you have to water that plant, whatever the case is, that's the backbone of what you're trying to do. So you got to consider that. So you're working these things, you've got all these different irons in the fire. You're trying to keep your health healthy. You're trying to keep your autoimmune deficiency down. You're trying to, grow your family and grow your kids, and you're trying to do all these different things, living in a climate that is not necessarily friendly to your chosen profession. What do you do outside of these things? Obviously you work out, which is a benefit for everybody. Needs to be working out. It's just something you should do. However, what else do you do? Who else? How do you disconnect sometimes?
That's a great question. So I spend a lot of time growing. I spend a lot of time reading. I spend a lot of time learning, being a part of mastermind teams. When I'm just like not doing anything, I will either I'll play some video games with my son. My daughter likes to go out and ride scooters up and down the street. And I mean, outside of that, like, I'm not the kind of person where I go out with my friends or do anything like that. Like, everything for me is like either revolving around self-care, whether it's even like some form of meditation, some form of like reflection.
Yeah.
I get up earlier than anybody else in the house so I can really like take care of myself, so that by the time they get up and they start telling me what to do and my kids run the show, like I'm good to go, and my mindset has been pointed in the right direction. And you asked, like, a lot of people always ask me that, like, hey, how do you do all the things that you do with juggling all of these things? And I think a lot of it had to do initially from me removing a lot of those excess things, because I used to go out and play poker with the guys. I used to be a part of a softball league. I used to do this, and I used to watch a lot of TV. And what I thought that was kind of like my version of unwinding, but it wasn't. It didn't really unwind me. It just wound me up.
Right.
My unwinding now is just like maybe going on a walk by myself, or just doing a workout by myself, or just chilling for a little while, reading a good book, like some kind of personal development book, something that's going to stretch me to grow, being a part of my mastermind team, doing things like that, or just spending one-on-one time with like my son or my daughter or my wife, trying to lock ourselves in the bedroom here so the kids don't knock down the door so we can get a second to talk, right? With homeschooling and everything. So it's like finding like little pockets of opportunities to grow all those little relationships, but then also like make sure that I have my alone time, my time by myself, which is every single day in the morning time, so that I can recalibrate. And then I still have those days where I'm not feeling it. And I have an amazing supportive wife. And I'm like, hey, I need to go out on a walk. I need to reset. And she's like, cool, go for it. And vice versa. Anytime it ever happens the opposite, I'm like, hey, I got this. Go ahead, take a few minutes or whatever, and then just working off of each other that way. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I just keep it super simple.
No, that's actually, because I was one of my prior guests, George. His thing was just woodworking. He wanted to go out in his shop and he just wants to lathe, and he wants to router, and he wants to sand, and he just wants to just go work on wood, and that's his thing, and there's got to be, everybody's got to have something, and I like to play the drums, and I can get in there for hours, and just wail away on them, but there's that point where you start looking at things and you say, okay, well, I can be here all day. How do I do it? It's just a reset, like you said, it's just being able to disconnect, and and disconnect is different than detachment. And, I remember, there are several books that I've read, and they talk about detachment, and I brought this up with a fellow officer of mine I was talking with this week, and we were talking about detachment and disconnection. The way I thought of detachment, and you have to detach as a leader, as somebody that's got other people in mind and thinking about the mission and stuff like that. Detach from it so you can see the big picture. Detachment is like the guys that go on spacewalks. They have the hose that's still connected to the space shuttle, but they're detached from the space shuttle. They're on a spacewalk, but they're still tethered to it. The disconnection is you're no longer tethered, and how far away are you going to get? So that disconnection, you want to, if you got to get disconnected, you got to make sure you have a way back, And like you said, you can't go and be go out drinking a ton or go out playing poker or whatever, because you get so detached from what else is going on with your family and you get so disconnected from what's going on with your family and everything, you start losing them because they're not involved, right? You're involving yourself and your buddies, and that's all you care about. And you can't go out and do that. You have to think about them. So yes, that detachment for just a minute. I need a little bit to go, break free for a minute, and I'll be right back. And that's, and so they understand that makes all the world of difference for a lot of people. And, so, I'd love to be able to keep you on here, but I've kept you on here so long, and I know you got a million things to do, and you got some reading to do. I'm assuming got another half a gallon to drink. Day's still young, and as do I. But how do people get a hold of Marc Hildebrand if they want to? Hey, that sounds interesting. What he's talking about. How do I get involved with that? How do I, consider that? What do we do? How do they get hold of you?
Great question, and thank you for asking me that. So I have a podcast. It's called the Leo Family Fitness Podcast. Leo for law enforcement officer, obviously, right. And then family and fitness, because those are the three pillars that literally hold up my entire life. So I have that podcast. I do microcasts on Monday or Wednesdays and Fridays, which are super short, 3 to 4 minutes of like inspiration and motivation. Just do me a favor and act on it. Don't just listen to get excited. And then I have interviews on Monday. And then I also I'm on Instagram and Facebook. So on Facebook, I'm First Responder Fitness with Mark. On Instagram, I'm LEO Family Fitness. And generally what I like to do is if anybody has anything that they're struggling with, I have multiple teams of law enforcement officers that I put together. Both who are like either specific to fitness and food advice or somebody who already knows what they should be doing with fitness and food, but they're just not doing it consistently. I have accountability groups to hold people to it. The best way to do that is to connect with me on one of those platforms. I have an assistant, and what she does is she'll flag a message if anybody says, hey, I want to talk to Mark about X, Y, and Z. And so that way I can just connect with you and best help you and give you that direction, which is sometimes not with me. Sometimes it's with somebody else. Because ultimately, I want what's best for you and your family. And here's the thing, we kind of talked about this earlier, but there's like a million different ways to do anything. All right. And anybody who tells you there's just one way to do it, and the way that they do it is the best and nothing else is they're all just telling you a lie. And so I'm just going to come out and say it, like, there's a million ways of doing it. I tried a million of them, and it wasn't that Tybo didn't work. It's just that didn't work for me.
Right.
And so I had to keep looking until I found that thing that worked. And when I did, now I want to shout it from the rooftops, right? Because that's what coaching is all about. And so, so if you guys connect with me, perfect. If I can, point you in a different direction, I'm all for it. Just whatever's best for you and for your family.
Right. That's awesome. Like I said, I met you on Facebook before you had all these other platforms. And to be honest with you, I don't think I started Instagram until, last year, the year before last. And, much less did I have the podcast Instagram or anything like that. And being able to, in the world we live in, the ability for us to be able to talk to each other, though we don't know each other, and yet we still want the best for each other. That's the ultimate goal. We are on this planet for other people, plain and simple. And God put us on this planet for each other. He wants us to put him first. Obviously we can do that. And then we got to start working on everybody else and saying, hey, we've got to, I need to help get you out of the muck and the mire, and we got to help you get here. And, we say that, I asked that question before, how do you help people who don't want to be helped? That you don't want to help anymore. Well, why don't you want to help them? Well, you still want to help them. You still want to see them grow. You want to see them do better in life. And there's people that hate you for what you do because of the uniform you wear, or, whatever the case is. You can't let that hold you back anymore. And you can't say, that just because I'm not liked doesn't mean I'm not going to help you. It's that same idea that, when somebody says, hey, don't call me Mr. So-and-so. I said, well, I'm supposed to call you Mr. So. No, you can call me Jeff, or whatever the case is. Well, I'm sorry. My mom taught me that I have to do this. And so I have an integrity that says I need to be XYZ. I have to be nice, or I have to be polite, and I have to show courtesy and all this different stuff. Well, that's the idea, is you have to do what's right because it's the right thing to do. And so integrity is a huge thing that it sounds like you have. It sounds like you're running with, and you're making sure everybody's well around you, and including yourself, and being a positive influence for that. So do you have any questions for the podcast, or for me specifically, before we cut you out of here?
Actually, I did want to say one more thing. Number one, I want to really just acknowledge and appreciate you for a second, Ken. And for a bunch of things. Number one, for you having such an open mindset, and just having to be a growth-based mindset, because you'd never responded to that message. If you had never taken me up on joining our team, like, first off, this connection would have never happened. Right. And that's just what happens when you surround yourself with other people who are growth-oriented. But then also, I know the amount of effort that it takes into putting together something like this, a podcast, doing the interviews, practicing, getting better, editing, doing all that kind of stuff. And so I know that your listeners greatly appreciate it, but I just want to take a second and just tell you how much I appreciate it for you doing stuff like this. I mean, it is so amazing, the ability that we have right now, not just with social media, but I could just drive in my car, open up my phone, and just put on a podcast where the great interviewer like you, and just listen and grow while I'm driving to and from work, rather than listening to music like we used to do in the old days. Right.
Right.
And so, but we still need people to put together stuff like this. So I just want to take a second and just say thank you. I greatly appreciate you for doing stuff like this.
I appreciate that. That's, getting positive accolades, not just from people that I know, which I got some great friends who say, oh man, I like this last episode and all this different stuff, but people that, we've never met in person, which is kind of a goofy thing, but, just having that and saying, hey, I listen to the podcast and it's great, and I live 1,000 miles away from you. However, I think it's, it's fantastic. I'm like, hey, awesome. That's cool. That's cool. And so the more that we can just help people and, like I said, do more for other people, that's my ultimate goal. Whether I make $1 on this or I make $1 million, I don't care. As long as somebody can take that and say, hey, you know what? I listened to this podcast one time, and, some things that got said, and it motivated me, or it inspired me, or lit that fire inside me to go do more. So, awesome. Thank you so much for that. So, well, in closing, I want to let everybody know that you can find the What's a Hero podcast on Instagram. It's under the What's a Hero podcast. On Twitter, once again, the What's a Hero podcast. LinkedIn, and obviously the ever famous Facebook at What's a Hero. And also we are at the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. And from there, you can find all the platforms in which you can listen to this podcast. And it helps when you download, because yes, you can listen to it from the website, which is cool. However, the more downloads I get, the more people start realizing, oh, hey, maybe that's something I can listen to, and it starts going into algorithms that either iTunes has or whatever podcast platform you have, and then you can get into more and figure out what more you have. So, you can get a hold of me, you can instant message me, you can do all this different stuff. Not instant message, but message me on Messenger, and you can leave comments on Twitter and Instagram, all these different things. Let me know that you're listening, and if you have questions for Mark, go to his sites that he mentioned, and then he'll answer you. He'll help you get to that point. If you forget how to get there, you can always go through us, and I can get you in touch with him, and we can tag you. So, you have anything you'd like to add one more time before we head out, Mark?
All right. Stay safe, guys. Stay healthy out there. That's all I got to say.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. And to all my law enforcement officers out there that are out there just keeping up the good fight. It's not always negative, and you can't always be negative also. Keep your heads up, keep your chin up, and think positive. Firefighters, thank you so much for keeping us safe. EMTs, nurses, doctors, you guys, you're the ones that we really count on. And our military vets, you guys that are active and reserves and retired, you guys make the difference, because without you, we wouldn't have what we have in the country that we have. And our teachers, we wouldn't be who we are without our teachers coming in and kind of planting that seed, when we were young. So thank you so much. So for everybody, this has been the What's a Hero podcast. For Mark, I've been Ken, and we are clear.